"So this is the filth running around with my daughter?" Lord Ravenshire's voice exploded through the throne room like a clap of thunder. Every noble, every guard, every servant froze where they stood. The ornate chandeliers seemed to tremble above. Every eye in the hall turned to the young man in blacksmith's clothes, standing at the center of the marble floor. Istredd didn't flinch. His calloused hands hung steady at his sides. His jaw was set. His dark eyes met the Lord's furious gaze without wavering. "My lord," his voice carried clear and strong across the silent chamber, "I love your daughter. I would do anything for her love." Silence. Lord Ravenshire's fist slammed down on the armrest of his throne like thunder splitting stone. The sound echoed through the vaulted ceiling. Nobles gasped and stepped back. The Lord Commander stepped forward from the shadows, his armor gleaming in the torchlight like a predator's scales. His hand rested on the pommel of his sword. "You're lucky your father's a hard-working man, boy." His voice dripped with contempt. "Or you'd be flogged in the square for your insolence." Across the room, pressed against a marble pillar, Cecilia stood frozen. Tears streamed down her face, carving lines through her powder. Her silk dress was wrinkled from where the guards had grabbed her. A guard's armored hand gripped her arm, holding her back as she reached desperately toward Istredd. "Please," she sobbed. "Father, please, he's done nothing wrong." Her father's eyes burned with fury so hot it could melt iron. He didn't even look at her. "You have shamed this house, Cecilia. You have disgraced your bloodline by sneaking around like a common—" "I love him." The words rang out like a bell. The nobles whispered behind jeweled fans and gloved hands. Lord Ravenshire rose from his throne, his robes cascading around him like blood-red water. But before he could speak, his personal advisor stepped close from the shadows. Lord Varon, thin, pale, with eyes like chips of black ice. He leaned in and whispered something into the Lord's ear. His lips barely moved, but whatever he said made Lord Ravenshire's expression shift. From rage to something far more dangerous, something calculated. He leaned forward slowly, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You said you'd do anything for my daughter's love." Istredd's chest rose and fell steadily. "Yes, my lord." "Then hear me clearly, blacksmith's boy." His voice dropped to ice. "There's a war brewing on the borders. The northern territories have been raided. Our allies cry for aid. You will be mobilized. Immediately." Cecilia's breath caught in her throat. "No, if you win this war," Lord Ravenshire continued, his voice slicing through her protest. "And if you survive the battlefield," he paused, letting the weight of those words sink into every soul in the room, "you'll marry Cecilia. I'll make you a duke under my reign, and historians will sing your name in the Hall of Praises." The room went deathly silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble. Cecilia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes were wide with horror and hope tangled together. The blacksmith Garon, standing near the entrance, closed his eyes in silent prayer. His weathered face was pale. Every noble watched with bated breath, waiting. Some smirked, some shook their heads. They all knew what this meant. It was a death sentence wrapped in gold. Istredd squared his shoulders. He stood taller. He met the Lord's gaze without fear, without hesitation. "I accept." Cecilia's knees buckled. The guard caught her before she fell. Lord Ravenshire smiled, but it was the smile of a man who'd just sentenced another to the gallows. "Then it's settled. You march at dawn." The Lord Commander nodded curtly and gestured to two guards. They moved forward to escort Istredd from the hall. But as Istredd turned to leave, he looked back one last time. His eyes found Cecilia's across the sea of nobles and torchlight, and in that look was a promise. "I will return." The guards led him away. The throne room erupted in whispers, but no one in that hall knew the truth. Not Lord Ravenshire, not the commander, not the nobles whispering behind their jeweled fans, not even Cecilia. Istredd wasn't just a blacksmith's son. He was the last surviving heir of a fallen kingdom, the son of the greatest swordsman who ever lived. The man a tyrant feared so much, he had to kill him in the dead of night. The same tyrant, starting this war. And when Istredd reached that battlefield, when he picked up his father's blade, the world would remember both their names, the legend, and his son. 15 years earlier, the fortress burned. Smoke choked the sky, turning the moon blood-red. Flames roared through the stone corridors like hungry beasts, devouring tapestries, consuming history, erasing a kingdom. A boy ran through the chaos. 8 years old, barefoot, his nightclothes torn and stained with ash and blood. "Father!" he screamed. "Father!" Behind him, steel clashed against steel. Men shouted. Someone screamed. The sound cut off abruptly. The boy's lungs burned. His feet slapped against cold stone as he sprinted through corridors he'd known his whole life, corridors that now felt like the jaws of a monster. He skidded around a corner and slammed into armored legs. A soldier, but the crest on his chest was wrong. Foreign. Enemy. The man raised his sword. A blade flashed from the shadows. The soldier's head rolled. "Istredd, run!" His father stood there, silhouetted against the flames, tall, powerful, the greatest swordsman in 6 kingdoms. His blade dripped red in the firelight. "Father, I won't leave you." "You will." His father grabbed him by the shoulders. His hands were shaking. "Listen to me, boy. Do you hear me? Listen." Istredd nodded, tears streaming down his soot-stained face. "You are the last of our line, the last heir. If you die, everything we built dies with you." His father's voice cracked. "Run to the eastern gate. Don't stop. Don't look back. Find the trade road and—" Footsteps, heavy, multiple. His father's eyes widened. He shoved Istredd behind him just as a dozen soldiers poured into the corridor. And at their center walked a man in black robes, Lord Malakar the Vile. He smiled. His teeth were white against his dark beard. So the great swordsman makes his final stand in a burning hallway. How poetic. Istredd's father raised his blade. "You betrayed us. You were my adversar, my friend. I was your fool." Malakar's voice was silk over poison. "Your kingdom was weak. Your ideals were childish. I simply corrected course. You murdered innocents. I removed obstacles." The soldiers advanced. Istredd's father didn't move. "Run, boy. Now." "Father," I said, "run." The roar in his voice broke something inside Istredd. He turned and ran. His small legs pumped as fast as they could. Behind him, steel sang its death song. His father fought like a god of war. Men fell. Blood sprayed. But there were too many. Istredd reached the eastern corridor. The gate was ahead. Freedom. Escape. He looked back. Just once. He saw his father on his knees, surrounded by corpses. Saw Malakar step forward with a poisoned dagger. Saw the blade slide between his father's ribs. Saw his father's eyes find his one last time. Live. Then the great swordsman fell. Istredd ran. He ran through smoke and flame and death. He ran until his lungs screamed and his legs gave out. He collapsed on a dirt road miles from the burning fortress, the sky lightening with dawn. A wagon rumbled to a stop beside him. A man climbed down, weathered, strong, soot under his fingernails. A blacksmith. "Gods above, boy. What happened to you?" Istredd looked up with hollow eyes. "They're dead. Everyone's dead." The blacksmith Garan knelt beside him. He saw the quality of the boy's torn nightclothes, saw the royal crest barely visible beneath the blood and ash. He understood instantly. Without a word, he scooped the boy into the wagon and covered him with canvas. "You're my son now," Garan whispered, as the wagon rolled away from the burning horizon. "I swear it. You're my son now." And the last heir of a fallen kingdom disappeared into obscurity, hidden beneath hammer and anvil, waiting for the day fate would find him again. The hammer rang against hot steel. 15 years had passed since the night of fire and blood. The boy who'd fled a burning fortress was now a man of 23, his arms thick with muscle, his hands calloused from years at the forge. Istredd plunged the red-hot blade into the water barrel. Steam hissed and rose around him like spirits. "Good work," Garan said from across the forge. His hair had gone grey at the temples, his face more lined, but his eyes were still kind. "That's a fine sword." Istredd lifted the blade, examining it in the afternoon light streaming through the workshop door. The edge was perfect, the balance true. Something inside him stirred when he held a blade. Always had, like muscle memory from a life he couldn't quite remember. "You've got a gift, boy." Garan wiped his hands on his apron. Natural talent most smiths would kill for, but both of them knew it wasn't just smithing. Whenever Istredd swung a hammer, his movements were too precise, too controlled, more like a swordsman's strikes than a blacksmith's labor. Garan had tried to train it out of him, tried to make him forget, but some things were bred into bone and blood. "I'm heading to the market," Istredd said, setting the blade aside. "We need more iron. Take your time. And boy," Garen's voice stopped him at the door, "stay out of trouble." There was weight in those words. There always was. Istredd nodded and stepped into the sunlight. The village of Millhaven was bustling with afternoon trade. Merchants called out their wares, children ran between carts. The smell of fresh bread mixed with horse and hay. Istredd moved through the crowd with easy confidence. He knew these streets, these people, this life. It was safe, quiet, anonymous, everything his childhood hadn't been. He was reaching for a sack of iron ore at the metalworker's stall when he heard the voice. "Excuse me, is this stall selling copper as well?" Istredd turned and froze. She was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Dark hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes like amber catching light. She wore a simple traveling cloak, but something about the way she carried herself spoke of nobility barely hidden. Yes," the merchant stammered, clearly as stunned as Istredd. "Finest copper in the region, my lady." She smiled. "I'm no lady, just a traveller." But Istredd knew that wasn't true. Their eyes met across the stall. Time seemed to stop. She caught her breath. A faint blush coloured her cheeks. "Do you work at the forge?" she asked. Istredd found his voice. "Yes, my father and I. We're blacksmiths." "That must be fascinating work." "It has its moments." She laughed, bright and genuine. The sound made something in his chest tighten. "I'm Cecilia," she said, extending her hand. He took it. Her skin was soft against his calloused palm. "Istredd, Istredd," she repeated, as if testing how his name felt in her mouth. "That's unusual." "So, I'm told." Behind her, a carriage waited. A servant stood nervously by the door, clearly anxious about his mistress wandering the common market. But Cecilia didn't seem to notice, or care. "Perhaps," she began, then hesitated. "Perhaps I could visit your forge sometime. I've always wanted to see how a blade is made." Istredd's heart thundered. "Anytime." She smiled again, radiant as sunrise. Then she glanced back at the nervous servant and sighed. "I should go, but I'll find you again, Istredd the blacksmith." She turned and walked away, her cloak swirling behind her. Istredd stood there, iron ore forgotten, watching until the carriage disappeared around the corner. "Boy!" Garen's voice came from behind him. The old blacksmith had followed him to the market. His face was grave. "That was Lord Ravenshire's daughter." "I know. This can only end badly." "I know that too, but neither of them could have known how badly, or how legendary." 3 months passed like a dream wrapped in danger. Cecilia returned to the forge the next week, then the week after, then twice a week, then every few days. She claimed she was fascinated by the craft, by watching metal transform under hammer and heat, by the artistry of creation. But both she and Istredd knew the truth. They were falling in love. It started with conversations at the forge entrance while Istredd worked, then walks through the forest paths near the village, then secret meetings in the old barn behind the miller's house. "Tell me about your childhood," Cecilia said one evening as they sat in a hidden garden she'd discovered. Moonlight filtered through the apple trees above. Istredd hesitated. He'd learned to lie about his past. Had to. Not much to tell. "My father found me on the road when I was young, took me in, taught me his trade." "You don't remember anything before that?" "Fire," he said quietly. "I remember fire." She reached for his hand. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Garen gave me a good life." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "My father wants me to marry a duke, someone wealthy, connected. He has 3 candidates already arranged." Istredd's jaw tightened. "Do you want to marry them?" "I want to marry you." The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and perfect. "Cecilia," he began, "I don't care that you're a blacksmith. I don't care what my father says. I don't care about any of it." She turned to face him, her eyes fierce. "I choose you." He kissed her then, under the apple trees with moonlight turning everything silver. But they both knew it couldn't last. Lord Ravenshire was becoming suspicious. Cecilia's long absences, her distracted smiles, the way she hummed while embroidering. He assigned his most trusted advisor to investigate. Lord Varon, pale, calculating, with eyes that missed nothing. He followed Cecilia through the marketplace, watched from shadows as she met Istredd in the forest, documented every secret touch, every stolen kiss, every whispered promise, and then he reported everything to Lord Ravenshire. The Lord's rage was volcanic. "A blacksmith?" His fist slammed the table in his private chamber. "My daughter is sneaking around with a blacksmith?" "I'm afraid so, my lord," Varon said smoothly. "They've been meeting for months. Bring them both to the throne room. Now." Varon bowed. "At once, my lord." But as he left the chamber, A thin smile crossed his pale face. Guards stormed the forge that evening. They dragged Istredd from his work. Garin tried to intervene and was struck across the face. Blood dripped from his split lip as he watched helplessly. "Let him go," the old blacksmith shouted. "He's done nothing wrong." But the guards didn't listen. They hauled Istredd through the streets like a criminal. People watched from windows and doorways. Whispers spread like wildfire. At Lord Ravenshire's estate, more guards dragged Cecilia from her chambers. She fought them every step, screaming Istredd's name. They threw him into the throne room. She was shoved in moments later, tears already streaming down her face. And Lord Ravenshire sat on his throne like a god of judgment, his face carved from fury. "So this is the filth running around with my daughter?" The throne room was packed with nobles, all pressed close to witness the spectacle. This was entertainment for them. Drama. Scandal. Lord Ravenshire rose from his throne slowly, his red robes billowing like blood in water. "Do you know what you've done?" His voice was deadly quiet, which was somehow worse than shouting. "Do you understand the shame you've brought on this house?" Cecilia's voice was hoarse from crying. "Father, please, I am not speaking to you." His words cut like a whip. He turned his burning gaze on Istredd. "You, blacksmith's boy. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could defile my daughter in secret?" "I love her," Istredd said simply. His voice carried clear and strong across the hall. "And she loves me," the nobles gasped. The Lord Commander's hand went to his sword, but Lord Ravenshire laughed cold and mirthless. "Love? Love? You speak to me of love while wearing blacksmith's rags and standing in a hall built by centuries of bloodline and duty. My clothes don't change what I feel." "Your clothes are all you are, boy." Ravenshire descended the steps of his throne, each footfall echoing. "You are nothing. You have nothing. You will never be anything." Garin stood near the entrance, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to speak, to defend the boy he'd raised, but he knew it would only make things worse. Cecilia struggled against the guard's grip. "Father, I'll do anything. I'll never see him again. I'll marry whoever you choose. Just please don't hurt him." "Oh, I'm not going to hurt him." Lord Ravenshire smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "I'm going to give him exactly what he wants." He gestured to Lord Varon, who stepped forward from the shadows and whispered in the Lord's ear. Everyone watched, waited. Lord Ravenshire's expression shifted as Varon spoke, from rage to something colder, more calculated. "Interesting," he murmured, then louder, addressing Istredd. "You said you'd do anything for my daughter's love." "Yes, my lord." "Then prove it." Silence fell like a blanket over the room. "There's a war brewing on our northern borders. The tyrant Malakar, you may have heard of him, has been raiding our allied territories, burning villages, killing innocents. Our allies cry for aid." Istredd's blood turned to ice at the name. Malakar, the man who murdered his father, the man who stole his kingdom. "You will be mobilized immediately," Lord Ravenshire continued. "You will march with my forces to the border. You will fight in this war." Cecilia's face went white as snow. "Father, no. And if you win this war," the Lord's voice rose over her protest, "if you survive the battlefield, if you return here alive and victorious, then I will keep my word. You will marry my daughter. I will grant you a dukedom, and your name will be recorded in the Hall of Praises alongside the great heroes of our realm." The nobles erupted in whispers. "It's a death sentence," someone muttered. "He'll never survive." "The Lord is clever. He gets rid of the boy and saves face." But Cecilia heard only one thing. She looked at Istredd with desperate, pleading eyes. "Say no. Please say no." The Lord Commander stepped forward. "My lord, with respect, this boy has no military training, no experience. Sending him to war is giving him a chance." Lord Ravenshire interrupted coldly. "More than he deserves." Every eye turned to Istredd. He stood in the center of the marble floor, surrounded by judgment and cruelty and impossible odds, and he thought of the night 15 years ago. The burning fortress, his father's last stand, the tyrant's smile, Malakar. He'd spent 15 years hidden, safe, anonymous, but fate had found him anyway. Perhaps it always would have. Istredd looked at Cecilia, saw the fear in her eyes, saw the love. Then he looked at Lord Ravenshire. "I accept." The words fell like stones into still water. Cecilia's knees buckled. She would have collapsed if the guard hadn't held her up. Garin closed his eyes, his lips moving in silent prayer. The nobles whispered with cruel delight, and Lord Ravenshire smiled, his terrible smile. Then it settled. You march at dawn. The guards moved forward to escort Istredd away. As they led him toward the door, he looked back one final time. His eyes found Cecilia's across the sea of jeweled nobles and golden torchlight, and in that look was everything he couldn't say aloud. I will survive. I will win. I will come back to you. I promise. The doors closed behind him. The throne room erupted in conversation, and deep in the shadows, Lord Varron smiled his thin, cold smile. Everything was going according to plan. The northern border was hell on earth. 3 weeks of marching through mud and rain had brought Lord Ravenshire's forces to a landscape of burned villages and scorched fields. Smoke stained the sky. The air reeked of death. Istredd marched with the common soldiers. They'd given him basic armor, ill-fitting and dented, a sword that was more rust than steel. No training, no preparation, just a death sentence, with extra steps. The other soldiers avoided him. They'd heard the story. The blacksmith's boy who dared love above his station. Most thought he'd be dead within the first engagement. Some had already started a betting pool, but Istredd barely noticed them. His mind was elsewhere, on the name Lord Ravenshire had spoken, Malachar. After 15 years, fate had brought him back to the man who'd murdered his family, the tyrant who'd stolen his birthright. The war wasn't random, wasn't just border skirmishes. This was personal. Form ranks. The Lord Commander's voice cut through the camp. Horns blared. Soldiers scrambled for weapons and positions. On the horizon, an army approached. Thousands of soldiers bearing Malachar's crest, a black serpent coiled around a bleeding heart. Istredd's hands clenched into fists. That crest. I remember that crest. The armies clashed like thunder. Steel screamed against steel. Men shouted war cries and death screams. Blood turned the churned earth into mud. Istredd found himself in the chaos, surrounded by soldiers twice his size with twice his training. The first man who came at him swung a war axe at his head. Istredd moved. He didn't think, didn't plan. His body simply knew. He sidestepped the axe, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted the soldier's arm, broke with a sickening crack. Istredd took the axe and buried it in another attacker's chest. Around him, Lord Ravenshire's soldiers stared. How did he... Did you see that? Istredd moved through the battlefield like water through stone. Every movement was precise, efficient, deadly. The muscle memory of his father's training, buried for 15 years, erupted from his bones like a volcano. He wasn't a blacksmith anymore. He was a swordsman reborn. An enemy commander charged him on horseback. Lance leveled at Istredd's chest. Istredd dodged, grabbed the lance, and used the horse's momentum to vault into the saddle. He snapped the commander's neck and took control of the mount. The Lord Commander watched from his position on the hill, his mouth falling open. What? What is he? The battle raged for hours. By the time the sun began to set, Malachar's forces were retreating. Lord Ravenshire's army had held the line, and standing in the center of the blood-soaked field, surrounded by fallen enemies, was Istredd. His borrowed armor was destroyed. His body was covered in cuts and bruises, but his eyes burned with something ancient and terrible. That night, in the command tent, the Lord Commander summoned him. Who are you, boy? Istredd met his gaze. I'm the man who's going to end this war. You fight like you've been trained since birth. Like, the commander stopped, realization dawning in his eyes. Like a prince of war. Istredd said nothing. The commander leaned back, studying him. There are rumors of a fallen kingdom 15 years ago. A royal line, slaughtered in a single night. They said one child escaped. His voice dropped to a whisper. They said he was the son of the greatest swordsman who ever lived. Then the rumors were right. The tent went silent. Finally, the commander spoke. Malachar will hear of this, of you. He'll know his past has returned. Good. Istredd's voice was cold as winter. Let him know. Let him remember what he stole. Let him fear. 3 more battles followed in the weeks ahead. Each time, Istredd led the charge. Each time, he cut through enemy ranks, like death itself. His name spread through both armies like wildfire. Lord Ravenshire's soldiers began calling him the last heir. Malachar's forces whispered his name in fear. And then came the final confrontation. Malachar's main force made its stand at the ruins of an old fortress, the very fortress where Istredd's family had fallen 15 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Lord Commander gave Istredd command of the vanguard. End this, last heir, end this war. Istredd looked at the ruins in the distance, saw smoke rising, saw the serpent banners flying, saw his father's ghost in every shadow. I will. The battle that followed would be sung about for generations. Istredd fought like a man possessed. He cut down Malakar's generals one by one, broke through their lines, pushed deeper and deeper into the fortress, until he stood in the very courtyard where his father had died. And across that blood-stained ground, he saw him, Lord Malakar the Vile, older now, greyer, but still radiating the same cruel confidence. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed across Malakar's face, then shock, then fear. You, he breathed. You're dead. I killed you. You killed my father, Istredd said, drawing his blade. You stole my kingdom. You murdered my family. It was necessary. It was betrayal. They clashed in the center of the courtyard. Steel rang like bells. Sparks flew. Malakar was skilled, vicious. He'd killed Istredd's father through treachery and poison, but he was still a formidable warrior. But Istredd was his father's son, and he'd waited 15 years for this moment. The duel lasted only minutes, but felt like hours. Finally, Istredd's blade found its mark. Malakar fell to his knees, blood spreading across his chest. You can't, he gasped. Can't change. What happened? No. Istredd's voice was quiet, final. But I can avenge it. He drove his blade home. Malakar the Vile, the tyrant who'd stolen a kingdom and murdered a king, died where the king had fallen. The war was over. Istredd stood alone in the courtyard as his father's ghost finally rested. When Lord Ravenshire's forces found him, he was kneeling in the blood-stained dirt, his head bowed, his sword planted in the ground before him. The last heir had won. Now came the even harder part, going home. The return to Lord Ravenshire's capital was unlike anything Istredd had ever experienced. He'd left as a condemned blacksmith. He returned as a hero. The streets were lined with people, thousands of them. They threw flowers and cheered his name. Children waved little flags. Old men saluted with tears in their eyes. The last heir, the last heir. The chant rolled through the crowd like thunder. Istredd rode at the head of the column, still wearing his battered armor, his face scarred from battle. The Lord Commander rode beside him, grinning like a proud father. They love you, boy. You've become a legend. But Istredd barely heard him. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for one face. Cecilia. And then he saw her. She stood on the steps of her father's estate, surrounded by ladies and guards. Her hands were clasped over her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. The moment their eyes met, she ran. She pushed through the crowd, her silk dress flying behind her, propriety forgotten. Istredd dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. They collided in the middle of the street. She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. He held her like she was the only real thing in the world. You came back, she whispered. You came back. I promised. I thought I'd lost you. Every night, I thought. I'm here. I'm here. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Istredd and Cecilia heard nothing but each other's heartbeats. Lord Ravenshire watched from his estate balcony, his expression unreadable. Lord Veron stood beside him. A remarkable turn of events, my lord. Indeed. Will you honor your word? Lord Ravenshire was silent for a long moment. Then, I must. To break my word now would destroy my credibility. He's a hero. The people would riot. And besides, he added quietly, perhaps this benefits us. A duke of low birth who owes everything to our house. He could be useful. Varon's thin smile returned. Wise, my lord, very wise. The wedding was held 3 days later. It was a grand affair. Every noble family in 3 provinces attended. The ceremony was held in the great cathedral, its soaring arches filled with music and light. Cecilia wore white silk embroidered with gold. She looked like something from a dream. Istredd wore new clothes, the finest he'd ever owned, but he still moved like a soldier underneath the finery. When they spoke their vows, Cecilia's hands trembled in his. I love you, she whispered. I love you, he replied. The priest pronounced them husband and wife. The crowd cheered, and Lord Ravenshire stood from his seat, raising his hand for silence. By the authority vested in me as lord of this realm, I hereby grant Istredd, hero of the northern wars, the title and lands of Duke Ironhearth. May his name be forever recorded in the Hall of Praises. The nobles applauded, some genuine, some forced, but Istredd barely heard them. He was finally free, finally safe, finally able to love Cecilia without fear, or so he thought. That night, at the wedding feast, Istredd stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Cecilia was inside, dancing with the other noble ladies. Garin found him there. The old blacksmith looked strange in fine clothes, uncomfortable, but his eyes were warm. "Proud of you, boy. You saved my life, Garin. You gave me everything. You earned everything yourself." Garin paused, then added quietly, "But your work isn't finished, is it?" Istredd's jaw tightened. "No, Malachar is dead. The war is won. You have your title, your wife, your life. Most men would be satisfied. Malachar was just a general, a puppet." Istredd's hands gripped the balcony railing. "My father's kingdom still lies in ruins. The people who betrayed us still hold power. The throne that should have been mine is occupied by another tyrant." Garin nodded slowly. "Then you mean to reclaim it?" "I have to." "And Cecilia?" Istredd looked through the window at his new wife, laughing among the nobles. Beautiful, radiant, finally happy. "I'll come back to her. I always do. Boy." Garin's voice was heavy. "Some journeys change a man so much he can never truly come home." "Then I'll change and come home anyway." The old blacksmith smiled sadly. "You really are your father's son." The next morning, Istredd knelt before Lord Ravenshire in his private chamber. "My lord, I have a request." Ravenshire studied him over steepled fingers. "You've just been made a duke. You've married my daughter. What more could you want? Permission to travel to my homeland, to the fallen kingdom." The room went silent. "Why?" "To see what remains, to honor the dead." Istredd met his gaze steadily. "To finish what was started 15 years ago." Lord Ravenshire's eyes narrowed. "You want to reclaim your birthright. I want justice. Justice is a luxury of the powerful Duke Ironhearth, and even for you, it may be too expensive. Then I'll pay the price." Ravenshire studied him for a long moment. Then he gestured to Lord Varon, who stepped forward from the shadows. "My advisor believes this venture could benefit our realm. If you succeed in stabilizing that region, it could open new trade routes, new alliances." Istredd fought to keep his expression neutral. Something about Varon's thin smile made his instincts scream. "I'll give you 50 of my best soldiers," Ravenshire continued, "and my blessing. But understand this, if you fail, I cannot save you. And Cecilia remains here." "I understand. Then go with my blessing, Duke Ironhearth, and return victorious." Istredd bowed and left the chamber. Behind him, Varon leaned close to Lord Ravenshire. "Are you certain this is wise, my lord? If he succeeds, we gain an allied kingdom. If he dies," Ravenshire shrugged, "then I'm rid of a potential rival, and Cecilia becomes available for a more advantageous match." Varon's smile widened. "Indeed, my lord, indeed." The journey took 3 weeks. Istredd rode at the head of 50 elite soldiers, all handpicked by the Lord Commander. They were good men, loyal, skilled, but Istredd barely spoke to them. His mind was on the ruins ahead, on the kingdom he'd fled as a child, on the father he'd lost, on the revenge that had waited 15 years to be claimed. Garin rode beside him, insisting on coming despite his age. "Someone needs to keep you from doing something stupid," the old blacksmith had said. On the 15th day of travel, Garin finally spoke what had been weighing on him. "There's something you need to know, boy." Istredd looked at him. "What?" Garin reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a long, cloth-wrapped bundle. "I've kept this hidden since the night I found you. I swore I'd never give it to you unless—" He unwrapped the cloth. Istredd's breath caught. It was a sword, but not just any sword. The blade gleamed like captured moonlight. The hilt was wrapped in worn leather, the crossguard etched with the crest of his father's kingdom, a rising phoenix. "This was your father's blade," Garin said quietly. "The legendary sword Dawnbreaker. I found it in the wagon where you'd hidden. You must have grabbed it before you fled." Istredd reached out with trembling hands. The moment his fingers touched the hilt, something inside him ignited. Memories flooded back. His father training him in the courtyard, the weight of a wooden sword in his small hands, his father's voice. "A blade is not just steel, son. It's will made manifest." "He was teaching you," Garin continued, "before you were taken from that life. You were already showing signs of his talent. That's why you move like a swordsman even after all these years. It's in your blood." Istredd drew the blade. It sang as it left the scabbard, a clear, pure note that echoed across the empty plains. The soldiers nearby stopped and stared. "Gods above," one whispered. "That's the Dawnbreaker, the lost blade of the Phoenix King. The legends were true," another breathed. Istredd felt the weight of destiny settle onto his shoulders like a crown. "Thank you," he told Garan, "for everything." The old blacksmith nodded, tears in his eyes. "Make your father proud, boy. Make them all proud." They reached the border of his homeland 3 days later. The landscape was scarred, burned forests, ruined villages. The tyrant who'd taken power after Malakar's betrayal had bled the land dry. But as they rode deeper into the territory, something changed. People emerged from hiding: farmers, villagers, refugees who'd survived 15 years of oppression, and they recognized the crest on Istredd's banner. "The Phoenix. The Heir," someone whispered. "The Heir has returned." Word spread like wildfire. By the time they reached the capital, a walled city that had once been beautiful, hundreds of people lined the roads. They knelt as Istredd passed. Some wept, some prayed, all hoped. But when they reached the gates, they found them barred. A voice called down from the walls. "The tyrant Krevak commands these lands. Turn back or face his wrath." Istredd rode forward alone. He raised his father's blade so it caught the sunlight. "I am Istredd, son of the Phoenix King. I am the rightful heir to this throne. Tell your master that his judgment has come." The gates trembled but didn't open. So Istredd prepared for war. They made camp outside the walls. That night, refugees came to him with information. "The tyrant Krevak is powerful," an old woman explained. "But he's not the real threat." "What do you mean?" "He has an advisor, a pale man with black eyes. He's the one who truly rules. He was there the night your father fell. He helped plan the betrayal." Istredd went cold. "What's his name?" "Lord Varon." The name hit Istredd like a physical blow. Varon, Lord Ravenshire's trusted advisor. The man who'd whispered in the Lord's ear during Istredd's trial. The man who'd arranged for Istredd to be sent to war. The man who'd probably arranged for those 50 elite soldiers to escort him here. Everything clicked into place. "It was all a trap," Istredd breathed. "From the beginning. Varon knew who I was. He sent me to the war hoping I'd die. When I survived, he sent me here back to the kingdom he helped destroy to finish what he started." Garen's face went pale. "Then, those soldiers aren't loyal to me. They're Varons, waiting for the right moment to strike." As if summoned by his words, steel whispered from scabbards behind them. Istredd spun. The 50 elite soldiers surrounded the tent, weapons drawn. Their commander stepped forward. "Lord Varon sends his regards, last heir. He regrets he cannot witness your death personally, but he trusts we'll be thorough." Istredd's hand went to Dawnbreaker, so he was behind it all. The betrayal 15 years ago, my father's murder. Malakar was just his puppet. Malakar was a fool who outlived his usefulness. "Just as you have, boy. There's one problem with your plan," Istredd said calmly. "What's that?" "I'm my father's son." He drew Dawnbreaker. The blade blazed with light in the darkness, and Istredd became death itself. He moved through Varon's soldiers like wind through grass. Dawnbreaker sang its song of vengeance. Men fell. Blood painted the ground. Garan grabbed a sword and fought beside him, the old blacksmith's strength surprising them all. In minutes, it was over. Varon's assassins lay dead or dying. Istredd stood in the center of the carnage, his father's blade dripping red. "Varon," he said quietly, "this ends now." The refugees who'd witnessed the fight spread the word. The rightful heir had returned, and he was coming for the throne. The assault on the city began at dawn, but Istredd didn't need an army. He walked to the gates alone, Dawnbreaker blazing in the morning light. Behind him, the people of his father's kingdom, farmers, craftsmen, refugees, followed with whatever weapons they could find. "Open the gates," Istredd's voice thundered across the walls. "Send out the tyrant Krevak, send out the traitor Varon. Let them face the justice they've avoided for 15 years. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the gates began to open. But it wasn't an army that emerged. It was a single man, Lord Varon. He looked exactly as he had in Lord Ravenshire's court, pale, thin, with eyes like chips of black ice. But here, in this place, his true nature was revealed. He smiled. "The lost prince returns. How dramatic. You betrayed my father. You helped murder my family. You stole my kingdom." "I eliminated weakness," Varon replied calmly. Your father was a dreamer, a fool who believed in honor and justice. He was leading this kingdom to ruin. So you murdered him in his sleep. I did what was necessary, and I'd do it again. Varon drew a thin blade, the same poisoned dagger he'd used to kill the Phoenix King. Just as I'll do what's necessary now. They met in the space between the gates and the gathered people. The duel was nothing like Istredd's fight with Malakar. Varon was faster, smarter, more dangerous than any opponent Istredd had ever faced. He'd been planning this for 15 years, had trained specifically to face the Phoenix King's heir should he ever return. Their blades rang like bells across the courtyard. Varon's dagger wove patterns of death. Istredd's Dawnbreaker blazed with righteous fury. You fight well, Varon hissed. Your father would be proud, but you'll die just as he did, betrayed and alone. I'm not alone, Istredd replied. And it was true. Behind him, the people of his kingdom stood united, watching, hoping, believing. Their faith gave him strength. Varon lunged, the poisoned dagger aimed at Istredd's heart. Istredd twisted, brought Dawnbreaker up. The legendary blade caught the dagger and shattered it. Varon's eyes went wide with shock. This is for my father, Istredd said. He drove Dawnbreaker through Varon's chest. The traitor fell to his knees, black blood spreading across the cobblestones. You can't undo what I've built, he gasped. No, Istredd agreed, but I can build something better. Varon the Vile, the shadow behind two tyrants, the murderer of a king, died on the same stones where his treachery began. The tyrant Krevak surrendered without a fight. The people stormed the palace, not with violence, but with joy. The rightful heir had returned. The Phoenix King's bloodline lived. That evening, Istredd stood in the throne room where his father had ruled, the same throne room where, as a child, he'd played while his father held court. It looked smaller now, sadder, worn by years of tyranny. But it was his. Garon approached, carrying something wrapped in silk. This was your father's crown. I found it in the vaults. Istredd looked at the golden circlet, simple, elegant, bearing the phoenix crest. I'm already a duke, he said softly. If I become king, I can never return to Cecilia. Not truly. This kingdom needs me. Then what will you do? Istredd was silent for a long moment. Then he made his choice. He appointed Garon as regent. The wise blacksmith who'd saved his life would guide the kingdom, while Istredd returned to Cecilia. He freed the oppressed people, opened the granaries, and began the work of healing. But he didn't take the throne. Not yet. I'll return, he told the gathered people. I swear it. But first, I must honor another promise. To the woman who gave me a reason to survive. They understood. The last heir had reclaimed his kingdom not through conquest, but through justice. And justice could wait for love. The journey back to Lord Ravenshire's capital took 2 weeks. When Istredd finally rode through the gates, he found the city in chaos. Cecilia met him in the courtyard, throwing herself into his arms. Varon is dead, he told her. The man who betrayed my father, who orchestrated everything. He's gone. She pulled back, searching his face. And what did you find? In your homeland, a kingdom that needs healing, a people who need hope. He took her hands in his. And a choice I need your help making. He told her everything. About Varon's betrayal, about the throne that was his by right, about the responsibility he'd been born to carry. I won't lie to you, he said. That kingdom needs me. Someday I'll have to return, to truly reclaim the throne, to be the king my father would have wanted. Then we'll go together, Cecilia said simply. You'd give up everything here? Your father's house? Your title? She smiled the same radiant smile that had stopped his heart in the marketplace. I already chose you over all of that, remember? A kingdom sounds more interesting anyway. He kissed her then, under the afternoon sun, while servants and nobles watched and whispered. Lord Ravenshire appeared on the steps of his estate. His face was unreadable. So Varon is dead? Yes, my lord. He was a traitor. To me, to you, to everyone. Ravenshire's voice was heavy. I was a fool to trust him. We all were. The lord looked at his daughter in Istredd's arms, saw the way they held each other, the way they looked at each other, and perhaps, for the first time, he truly understood. You'll make a good king, Duke Ironhearth, he said quietly. When the time comes, and Cecilia will make a fine queen. It was as close to a blessing as the proud lord would ever give. That night, Istredd and Cecilia stood on their balcony, overlooking the city. Tell me about your kingdom, she said. Our kingdom. So he did. He told her about the forests that had burned but would grow again, about the people who'd suffered but hadn't broken, about the throne room where his father had ruled with wisdom and justice, about the future they would build together. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Nothing worth having is," she replied. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her. A blacksmith's boy no more, not quite a king yet, but a duke, a hero, a husband, the last heir who'd reclaimed his birthright not with vengeance alone, but with love as his compass. His father's blade rested against the wall inside Dawnbreaker, the sword of legends. Someday soon, he'd draw it again. Someday soon, he'd return to the throne that was his by blood and right. But tonight, he held the woman who'd given him everything, and that was kingdom enough. The legend was just beginning. The historians would sing of the blacksmith who became a duke, of the war hero who reclaimed a fallen kingdom, of the last heir who avenged his father with steel and heart. But they would sing loudest of the love that made it all possible, the love between a princess who chose her own path and the prince who'd been hidden in plain sight. Together, they would rebuild what was broken. Together, they would forge a new legend. Love and dagger, heart and blade, the last heir and his queen.